And welcome once again to another episode of Economic Preppers. As I'm joined with Patrick and Dylan. How you doing, guys?
Doing great. It's been fun. Good day.
Plenty to talk about. Hey, is there anything going on with Bitcoin? I think we should talk about that a little bit. There might be a little bit of news on that side. So let me share my screen and talk about a few things that have been happening of late. So here we go. So first off, we had this tweet from the SEC where they said they got compromised the day before on January 9th. I'll give it in terms of the actual dates. So on January 9th, there was a tweet that came out regarding the Bitcoin ETF that from the SEC that said allegedly said that the Bitcoin ETF or one of them was approved. It might have been BlackRock's or Grayscale's. I'm not certain, but then so a tweet came out, and then Gary Gensler hopped on there and said that no, not approved. And then the next day, it got approved. So there's been a lot of buzz. There's been plenty of stories been written about it. There's a story here on Zero Hedge from Crypto Mom talking about like it shouldn't have taken this long. We'll get into that. But before we do, let's just talk about it. So Patrick, as a resident, retired full-time Bitcoin miner who still does it part-time, you're very much in the pulse of Bitcoin. So why don't you give us your own viewpoints on this ETF, what it means, and the price action of late?
That's a really loaded question. So
thank you.
We've been talking about the ETF and what it means. And what it really means is the traditional investors, traditional businesses, and they're going to have exposure to Bitcoin as part of their portfolio now. So what we're going to see is a lot more demand for Bitcoin. And that's good news in terms of what's, the big scheme of Bitcoin and where we're going. Similarly, when we're talking about this ETF, what we saw happen was quite funny because we have been discussing this. What's going to happen with ETF? Is it going to go crazy up or is it kind of priced in or what's going to happen? And what I believe we thought was going to happen really happened, which was, again, it was a little bit priced in. We saw the run up just a little bit, but if anything, it was just more manipulation than anything. It was really quite funny. And I don't even believe the story, right? Like the SEC's Twitter page, X page got hacked, which was verified by X, but I don't understand like what dummy at the SEC didn't put 2FA on like a government. I mean, this is arguably one of the most influential accounts on Twitter. So that was kind of funny to see it go up. But by the time even you were texting me, I was like, dude, no, this is not real. Even though we found out really early, I was going, it can't be real because A, I didn't hear about it from my legit source. And B, my legit source confirmed it wasn't legit. And then thirdly, it was verified by the blockchain, right? The price came crashing right back down. If it was real, we would have seen some kind of sustained growth. But I'm telling you guys, I think the reality is who tweeted it out today? It was it
Joe?
No, it was, I don't remember who it was, but they were tweeting at, it was either Joe or possibly it was Peter Schiff, but he was suggesting that, this is the only way that people know how to do it because they're required to buy Bitcoin this way. But that's not true, right? Like when you look at Fidelity, they're self-custodying their Bitcoin. What I see happening here that should alarm us more than anything that no one's talking about is Coinbase becoming the new bank, right? Are they becoming the new central bank? Because what I see here is Coinbase is going to be custodying a lot of Bitcoin. And we've already had, reason to speculate that they don't hold the Bitcoin that they're supposed to have, that they've been selling Bitcoin to people that they don't have. And that's why we see a lot of pauses. And there really isn't an audit trail, but it's just going to make it much harder to catch when you have Bitcoin coming in, flooding that wallet as well. Coinbase is going to have, one of the largest deposits of Bitcoin in the world.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to audit and see what happens with Coinbase because, as you said, they're custodian for a number of these ETFs. I think it was 11 that was approved, and they're like custodians for like 8 or 9 of them. So it's pretty significant. Yeah. Dylan, what do you have to say on that?
Oh man, theatrics. There's a couple things to take away from all this stuff that I think is important. One is any sort of like major point of information that can manipulate the markets or change the direction of a market or whatnot, right? They know this. They have teams of people looking at this, considering what will happen, analyzing things. And They have PR teams that manufacture different strategies on how to release things, different types of news. Right, this is all part of a plan, or at least, if I were in a position of that much power, I'd probably have teams in place to kind of at least have these strategies in case we need to deploy them. So I think you can always expect some sort of smoke and mirrors going on when these big announcements are happening. It just is what it is. It's the world we live in. And like Patrick said, it's like I don't necessarily believe that the SEC's account was hacked, or at least hacked in like actually hacked versus like a staged hack. It definitely could have been a staged hack. I think it's more likely something like that. But if it was actually hacked, right, the takeaway is there are groups of people out there that are identifying weaknesses in people's accounts, in different individuals, different organizations, and they have teams of hackers that will go out and try to compromise those accounts and those individuals. Right? We see that in the space all the time. So it's definitely something to be aware of whenever we're talking about crypto and Bitcoin. Like there are bad actors out there, and their whole purpose is to find vulnerabilities and exploit those. And that's just the world that we live in there. I think the final thing is that we're talking about Bitcoin, we're talking about this ETF, we're talking about this hack, we're talking about all this kind of stuff. But just keep in mind that Bitcoin hasn't changed, right? Bitcoin is still Bitcoin. It's still doing Bitcoin things. It's everyone around Bitcoin that changes. So I don't know where I heard this, but it's like Bitcoin is stable. It's predictable. You know what it is. There's 21 million. You know when the blocks are going to be produced. We know when the halving is going to happen. We're going to talk about that later, right? Bitcoin stays the same. It's everyone else and everything else that fluctuates around Bitcoin that throws people off. And so one thing when there's a lot of noise is just like look at Bitcoin and be like, do I have more sats today than I did yesterday? Right. And if you're doing that, you're doing all right because you're increasing the percentage of your holdings in Bitcoin. And that's all you can do. And just let everyone else be crazy and everyone else be wild and just be calm, be relaxed, and just trust in Bitcoin, trust in the numbers. I think that's something that's very important to think about with a lot of the changes that are happening now in the coming months.
Yeah, I have to agree with everything you guys just said. And just to share with the audience here, here's just an image of the price this week. And you could see that big spike up on like with a tweet where the SEC came out and they were hacked and not hacked. But you could see the price went up, then it went down, then it went stabilized. And you could see as you were saying, we're about 100 days away from the halving. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But you could see that things are priced in. And and there were three things that can really happen. That can happen when the news is released. And I tweeted this out today. One, nothing, like the price remains where it is. Two, the price could go down as you're selling the news, buy the rumor, sell the news. Or three, the price spikes up, but that's usually on rumored news or news that's unexpected. This was expected. We've just been waiting. Everybody knew the date. Everybody that knew that this was expected news. And they even said that it's probably going to be released after hours when the market is closed. So you even knew the time on the 10th when it's going to happen. You didn't know exactly how it's going to play out, but it played out and it was pretty much priced in already. So this has been expected for months. And as Crypto Mom wrote on Zero Hedge, which I shared earlier, this was expected. It just took way too long, and it created a buzz that didn't need to be created when they just followed their normal process and approved it. And even Gensler, when he approved it with like almost prejudice and hesitancy, and just say, hey, even though we're approving this, we're not endorsing Bitcoin. We're just saying that we approved it because we're supposed to. But that doesn't. But remember,
mainly because they're like, well, because we lost this settlement with the SEC with XRP, and since we lost with XRP, here's what we have to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So it's much ado about nothing big, but it's a big deal in the long run. It's kind of like what we'll talk about the halving and the events like that and how that affects price too. But we'll get to that. But before we get to that story, I wanted to share something because this is the first major show that we're doing of 2024. This news came out, and remember, I've said before that they kind of bury news during the holidays. So there was a story that came out about BRICS, which I've talked a lot about in the past. And let me share my screen and just cover a couple quick stories here. This was a story in August about 6 countries being invited: Saudi Arabia, Iran, Egypt, United Arab Emirates, Ethiopia, I think was the other one, and also Argentina. But Argentina declined, and that declined right before New Year's Day. And I thought people were going to jump all over this, but basically Argentina is reworking all their economy. They're reworking their government with Javier Milei taking the presidency there. But there's 5 new countries that are involved in BRICS. And what this is I think that turning the page, because we're looking at the economy and being prepared. I think we're looking. This is a major event that people are not really speaking about, and you won't see the Western media talking about it. And I just want to touch on a few quick stories that I was going to do a separate video, and I may still on this, but of course that didn't pop up. So this is a story that I didn't get much coverage about. The Chinese banks are running away from the LBMA gold auctions, and that's the London Bullion Market Association. I believe that's the right LBMA is. But it's the London market for setting the price of gold. So the Chinese banks have been involved since 2016. And last year, they're not auctioning, they're not buying gold in London anymore. And one of the reasons, and as a result of that, and this is in the story, of course, it's going to refresh, but here's a post that came out. This is what you're seeing is a divergence in price of gold in China versus London. It's now like 7%, and it's going higher and higher. A couple quick stories to mention about that as well. Saudi Arabia, they've been considering accepting yuan for oil sales for a long time, and I'm going to get to a point in a moment here where China and the Saudis have agreed on settlement for the oil trade in the yuan, or renminbi, which is another name for yuan, to insulate away from the oil sanctions. So, what does all this mean? And I'll explain what I'm getting to, and then I'll get you guys' opinions on it. But basically, what the Chinese and the Saudis have created is they've created a non-petrodollar marketplace where they could sell oil for gold with the yuan in between. So China buys oil from the Saudis for yuan, and then the Saudis immediately take the yuan and buy gold on the Shanghai market. So this is more proof that the dollar is dying. They're not telling you this, but here's a two-step process that is immediately, as you just connect the dots, they're selling oil for gold and they're getting away from the dollar. So I just pause there and let you guys, like Patrick, any thoughts there on what's happening with BRICS and what this means for the dollar?
My perspective has mainly come from my Egyptian heritage. So I'm always interested about what's happening with Egypt, especially with the war happening right now and just the conflict going on in Israel and Gaza. The entire Middle East is, it's just hectic right now. I was talking to my wife about wanting to take my son this summer to go to Egypt. And the reality is, it's ridiculously expensive right now, but also it's just not the best time to go there, right? There's a lot of just turmoil right now in the region. So for me, seeing Egypt as well in this is really interesting, knowing that the whole BRICS nation is now involved in like what's happening in the Middle East too. It seems really smart. And again, we've talked about this for a while. The dollar is not dying. The dollar has been garbage for a long time. You guys think that we're the only people who figured that out? You don't think these other nations have understood the tactics because they're not doing them themselves, right? They understand what's going on. And so I think they're protecting themselves against the deflating value of the dollar. That's why the Chinese have been buying up so much stuff here. They're buying up land here and crops here. What are they trying to do? They're trying to spend their dollars as fast as possible, and they don't want any more. And if you're going to give them land for garbage, great. They're going to buy up everything that they can spend with the dollar. Whatever's for sale, they're spending it all. And in the meantime, the yuan is gaining value against the dollar. So at the end of the day, there's a win-win scenario. They could even purchase back their own currency from the United States and just be buying their currency back from the US with those dollars silently as well. And we don't know if that's happening. That could easily be going on. And we have no idea who's coming across the borders and what their intentions are. But if all they want to do is collect yuan for dollars, that could be something that is going on behind the scenes all over the United States, and we'd have no clue. So I don't know what's going on, but what I can tell you is Bitcoin is the safety for that. Bitcoin is what you run to when you don't know what's going on, because you can always tell what's going on with Bitcoin.
Well, we'll get to Bitcoin in a moment, but first let's get Dylan's opinions on this thought. There's a lot to talk about here. Dylan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, there is a lot to talk about, and you can get really complex with all this stuff. And I think the simple thing is like we know that you don't want to hold dollars. Like if you're listening to this show, like you're hearing it now. If you've heard it before, like you don't want to hold dollars long term. It's not going to. They're not going to be stable enough. They're not going to be able to provide for you in the future, right? We know they lose value. Like these are facts. So you get the dollars, like you want to make the dollars, as many dollars as you can, and then you want to acquire assets. The whole game is asset acquisition and asset utilization and protection, right? That is the whole game that is being played, right? That's just like the simplest way to explain it is, what do you want to do? You want to acquire the most assets that you can utilize, and you want to protect your assets, right? That's all you want to do. All this other stuff is just noise, shuffling around to try and acquire a little more assets here, a little more assets there. But that's all it is. And so if you're focused on acquiring assets and you know the dollar is not an asset, right, at least a long-term asset, it can be a short-term asset depending on where you're at. If you're in Argentina, for example, because we mentioned that, it is an asset there because the relative value of the dollar versus the value of the Argentinian peso, right, is so much better. So it can be a longer-term asset for people in Argentina, but generally overall, the dollar is not an asset that you want to hold on to. You want to hold on to things that you can protect and secure, right? Things that you can hold through time without them degrading, which is why gold, silver, that kind of stuff has been valuable. But the problem with those is we don't know how much there is. It can always be seized and everything like that. It's why houses and land are valuable. The problem with houses and land is that if you don't have a military to defend it, you have to trust someone else with a gun to defend your house and land. And if you do that, well, in general, you can rely on them, but not all the time. Or they can be defeated by someone else that has bigger guns or more people, right? So that is the problem with houses or lands, pieces of land, or like, the problem with the government being like, we're going to change the tax structure on the land that you own, and you can't do anything about that because they got the bigger gun, right? That's the problem with those. But with something like Bitcoin, because you have that, because it's an option, right? It is like the one true asset that you can truly own and hold and store. And so if you're able to start allocating some of those funds to something like Bitcoin, like, you don't have to worry about all this stuff. Just know that you get the dollars and then you get rid of the dollars to buy assets that produce more things for you, more purchasing power in the future. That's
Jeff, do you have any other questions you'd like us to answer where we end up with Bitcoin always at the end? Because it seems like we can acknowledge these problems exist. And, these stories, they no longer frighten us or surprise us. It just reminds us why we do what we do. And I think that's really the mantra of prepared, not scared. That's fine by me. Let's keep going, because it doesn't change the way I do my life.
Yeah, because it's like look, just like if you have something like Bitcoin, a financial money that can't be taken from you. If you have if you're prepped like Patrick, you have like months and months supplies of food, all in Mylar bags. If you have weapons and all that kind of stuff, if you have the things, if you focus on your health and fitness, so you're strong and healthy and you're alert, right? Whatever happens in the world around you, you're like, I'm prepared, right? I can handle it. I can't be better prepared. These things are all within your control to set up, to build within your own life. And so if you focus on those things versus all the external noise out there that you have no control over, like all that gossip and all that kind of stuff that people focus their attention on, like you have no control over the SEC's Twitter account, if they're hacked or not hacked, right? Zero control over that. So you focus on the things that you can control, right? You're going to be better off. You're going to be like, oh, that's interesting, but it's not really relevant to what I'm doing, right? I'm going to do what I'm going to do regardless. I'm going to be better off today than I was yesterday, tomorrow than I am today.
Yeah, you just got to remove the emotions out of Bitcoin, right? Bitcoin is, you just buy it every time you get a paycheck. It doesn't matter your dollar cost averaging. It doesn't matter if it's 10,000, 20,000, 30,000, 40,000, 50,000, 100,000. You just keep buying, because overall dollar cost average is the strategy.
Well, before I get to our last Bitcoin story for today, which is, I know we all wind up there, and the reason we went up there, and I'm glad you brought this up, Dylan, is it is about assets. And I know I've heard from subscribers that we need to emphasize assets are what's the common denominator. And that's what I try to focus on. It's like all these stories, all this noise, the common denominators are like follow the money. Everybody's trying to get assets. They're trying to get rid of it's Gresham's law in action. They're getting rid of bad money, drives out good. The bad money is going to be spent. The bad money is your fiat money. And while in some countries like Argentina, the dollar is better than their local currency, but eventually, because it's not asset backed anymore, that's not gold backed, the dollar is going to be just paper. It's eventually going to be worthless. They're buying real assets. They're buying tangible property. They're buying goods and services. They're buying gold, silver, they're buying Bitcoin, because eventually this paper is going to be worth nothing, because eventually all fiat currencies go away. And it takes time for that to happen. But we're seeing the path to that destruction by what's going on with the BRICS nations, and they're driving the path to get from oil to gold and not using the dollar, getting away from the dollar system. and they're not buying. They're not in the T-bill market. They're not in the gold auction market. They're not involved in those things. And that's the bottom line. All these stories have a common denominator. If you follow the money, you understand that everybody's trying to acquire assets. That's what's really going on. And you're not it goes back to also to what Ray Dalio said as well. The BRIC stations, you're going to see things like the cost of trade going up and things like that. The BRIC stations, the trade routes, something that's going to be part of the story with Egypt now involved. That's the Suez Canal. The price of going through the Suez Canal, the price of the Panama Canal going through there is already through the roof, and people have to go around they have to go all around South America as a result, because the Panama Canal can't handle it. You're going to have BRIC nations limiting which countries can go through Suez Canal. That's going to be a major issue, and it only compounds the issues that are in the Middle East. A lot of these conflicts are really masking economic issues, which drive a lot of the actions. And again, it's about acquiring all the assets, which all leads back to Bitcoin, as you both said, which goes back to our final major story of today, which we want to talk about, which is the halvening and the Bitcoin halvening. Let's see this. Let's get the clock up here. It is roughly 100 days away. It's a little over. It's like 3.5 months away. And what that means is, for those who don't know, it just means that the amount of Bitcoin is produced by the miners. That's their job. They make Bitcoin, and every 10 minutes, there's more Bitcoin rewarded out there. But that reward is going to be cut in half. So instead of 900 Bitcoin per day, it's only going to be 450 per day. Now, that's the supply shock. And that doesn't, much like this ETF launch that just happened, it's not going to be like on the halvening day, prices soar. It doesn't happen that way. But what it is that this is a prelude. It is a precursor to supply shock, that there's not as much Bitcoin in the marketplace, and the price will go up because supply and demand. So, Patrick, what are your thoughts? You're big on this halvening. Tell us a little bit more, and what's going on in the mining community as a result.
Everyone's watching what, block 840,000? Is that what it is? I think that's the block number, because every 210,000 blocks, a block happens every 10 minutes, which again is where we get the 4-year halvening cycle, right? So the math should all add up here. Every 210,000 blocks, the miners' rewards get cut in half. So right in April, we're going to see the reduction of our rewards come down in half due to the Bitcoin blockchain reward structure. But that's not the only way that Bitcoin miners make their Bitcoin, right? We also get Bitcoin from the fees that are given out. The miners get those fees. So for me, as we see the price of Bitcoin go up, we might not have seen the ETF news impact right away today. We didn't see 50,000 right now. Could 50,000 happen later today? Sure. But are we going to see 60,000, 70,000 today? Probably not, right? We weren't seeing, like, as we talked about, this huge bump today. And I don't think we'll see that when the mining block comes up, where we reduce it and we start the halvening. I believe that what we'll see between now and April is a lot more miners coming online, because right now they're getting as much Bitcoin as they possibly can with the new S21s that just came out. And we're really happy. Right now, everybody is getting ready to launch these S21s. So we should see the Bitcoin hash rate just become astronomically higher, especially with what Riot and Marathon are putting in private investment money they're raising. Bitcoin hash rate is about to skyrocket. And this is what I was telling you guys about last year. If you would have gotten involved right in that last, 12 months, you would have been able to mine this whole last year with these higher rewards before all these miners got online. And what's happening now, it's just a race to get the next block.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And Dylan, any thoughts on the halving that's coming up in a couple of months?
It's just Bitcoin doing what Bitcoin does. And the cool thing is like, when it's going to happen. Right, you can be off by a little bit just because the blocks are approximately 10 minutes, but we know what's going to happen at this point in time. Was the beginning of April for this, and roughly, right?
Middle of April.
Was that
middle of April?
Middle of April. Okay, yeah, because I know before it had been like March, end of March. Now it has moved up some just because of the different block times, but this is all predictable. And Bitcoin hasn't changed. I know I've said this before, and I'll say this again: is like everything around Bitcoin is changing. Bitcoin is staying the same, right? It is like, it's like it's like trusting a ruler or a tape measure to measure the things around you, and knowing with certainty that the tape measure is accurate and never changes, even if everything else is changing, you can always use that same tape measure to measure everything. And that's Bitcoin. So I think it's cool, and it's a really fun time to be involved. And if you're listening to this, like, you know, the ETF has been approved, but there's still a lot of people that are unfamiliar with Bitcoin, but they're going to become more and more familiar. More
even
and more
the
channels.
ETF companies themselves, Dylan, they're not allowing you to purchase their shares. There's a lot of companies who are, the ETF's there, but you can't buy it. What are they actually doing? They're just stacking Bitcoin. That's all they're doing. They just want to buy Bitcoin. While the prices are low, they're not going to sell the ETF, because if they sell it, then they have to actually sell it and buy more and drive up the price. You're not ever going to be able to replace the Bitcoin that someone is buying for the same price ever again. So they never want to sell their Bitcoin. They want to take the money in first. So it's just a big, huge game. They're becoming a new bank. You guys, open your eyes. The only person doing it right is Fidelity. They're self-custodying their Bitcoin.
Yeah,
which is essential.
Yeah, and I think that, you know, as people learn about Bitcoin and learn about this, and again, back to assets, this is the one asset class that is completely predictable. We know how much it's going to be. We know the script. We know that they're going to cut supply in 3 months, and it's going to be cut 4 years later. And we just know how many there's ever going to be. They can find more gold. They can find more oil. It's the only asset that's like that. But to wrap up the show, I'm going to close out with something that's a little bit different this year, because this is our first major show of the year. And again, thank you for watching. Hit the like and subscribe and all that cool stuff. Share out the video. We really appreciate that. We really appreciate you spending some time with us. We know that's valuable to you. But I want to ask both of you individually, give it some thought. But I'm going to leave with you, Patrick. Aside from Bitcoin, what is and aside from what's going to happen, we think in November, what do you think is going to be the major economic story, or the major story this year? Doesn't have to be economic. What's going to be the major story of 2024 for you? Prediction time. Just think about it. Dylan's got more time.
Dylan asked me for my second favorite crypto, and I was really prepared to quote Michael Saylor that there is no second best. So, gosh, you know, as I really think about it, honestly, I believe it's going to be more of a spiritual thing than it will be something physical going on. I think that we're going to start, you know, like you guys know me, I'm a Bible believer. So for me, what I believe is coming is what we've been waiting for a long time. I don't think things are going to get a lot better here. I suspect things are going to get worse. And I think this whole alien story, I think we have just started to see the beginning of that. Again, my belief is in God and Glocks. So in Jesus' name, I'm going to shoot the alien. Like, I don't know what to tell you guys. If I see an alien, you know, I don't need 20,000 cop cars to come. I've got myself. I'm going to go first, you know, like, I don't know what's going to happen, but I believe it's going to be something around like aliens. The second one that it could be is I believe they want to lock us down. Jeff, shut up. I don't
know.
want to.
I'm laughing because I literally considered making that the story, but I'm like, I can't do that to Patrick. I mean, I'm going to mention it. I mentioned the alien story, but I said I'm not going to consider it.
But bro, I mean, there's
full circle. Now you're telling me the alien story is one of the stories. Which I don't know even what to say.
There was no videos of a brawl. Dude, there's like 7 videos of a guy walking into Walmart to steal a candy bar. Like, how is there no videos of anything? And then there was this weird video that I saw that really scared me a lot, like from the top with the thing that looked like it was crawling around like one of those dementors. I don't want to be around in that world. So I choose to believe that there was a brawl. But a question you asked me was what stories I think are going to happen. Probably some next woohoo virus infected alien.
Well, I'm going to give you a follow-up because I know you want to touch on Bitcoin. You want to close on Bitcoin. I'll give Dylan the opportunity to go next. But Patrick, I'm going to come back to you for a Bitcoin price prediction for December. But so mull that over. Dylan, what is your thought about the story for the rest of the year?
Oh, man. This is tough. I keep thinking AI. I know AI was this past year, and people are tired of it. But if it is on an exponential curve, like a lot of people are excited for and fear, that means that it's only going to be more solidified in pop culture, in our institutions and organizations, in software platforms, and all these in companies this year than it was last year. So like last year kind of broke on the stage. It was kind of like usable to the masses. The amount of things and programs that I'm seeing that AI is doing, it's mind blowing, and it's just going to become more and more. Well, I know for example, you know, a guy I know works for Amazon, and they dropped all their products to work on AI this last year, right? And so those are going to come to market for these bigger organizations. I saw somewhere, it might have been Deloitte. They created their own AI system to assist their employees that they deployed. So you're going to see this stuff coming and actually being used, and the implications of that is going to be very, very interesting. There's going to be a lot of productivity because of it, for the people that actually take advantage of that. However, it's also really scary, because I was listening to, it was this Joe Rogan clip where they're talking about AI, and they're like, we want it to, like basically like a prediction engine. And they're like, well, we want to be able to solve chemistry equations, right? And so what it did in that process of solving chemistry equations, it had to learn chemistry, the actual chemistry, in order to better predict how to solve the equations, because by knowing the fundamentals of chemistry, it had more accuracy in its predictions. And there was a few other areas where they talked about how like it did this on its own, right? It's like, they want me to predict this certain topic, so I'm going to actually have to learn how that topic actually works. And so it did that, and they had no idea how or why it did that. And those are the type of things they're cool, fun to have discussions about, but also really scary when you think about like,
Scary,
all right,
yeah.
if it starts optimizing for the wrong
God
thing, you
and
have a
law.
paperclip problem.
Well, I'll come back to you, everybody, with their predictions, but let me talk about what I think is going to be the story. And I'm not going to go down the alien route. And if those you don't know, we're talking about the Miami Mall story. And if you don't know what it is, go out and find it. It's all over the internet. The Miami Mall
Look what
story.
you've done to me, Jeff. Look what you have done to me, Jeff.
I
have given you a little bit more red pills, and I have awakened you a little bit further. That's all I'm saying. I'm just saying, question everything. That's all I say. I'm not saying anything's factual. Question everything. But let me close with what I think is going to be the story, and I think it's kind of tied to two stories I just saw in Zero Hedge. Cubans are preparing for a 500% fuel price hike. Easy for me to say, and also. This is very timely with the temperatures that are going down all over the country this week. Will the Texas power grid survive next week's polar vortex? So what I think is going to be the big story is about energy. And it goes back to an economy. Everything's going to be a fight over assets, and energy is a major deal. And it drives everything in our economies and everywhere. It's going to be, it says it's a limited resource because they want to control it. And those who control the assets are going to control the prices, which are going to kind of mask the hyperinflation of the dollar, because everything's going to cost more in dollars. So I think that's going to be the major story that's going to be out there. And again, people are going to be taking those dollars and moving them into assets like Bitcoin, which will drive the price up, which brings us to the close of the show. Dylan, I'll start with you. What is your price prediction for somewhere in December of this year for Bitcoin in the US dollars?
Oh, I can't. I'm not going to give a price prediction. I have no idea where it's be. I just know that it's worth. It's. I hope it's lower. Because then I can buy more Bitcoin, right? That's my hope. But when you really start thinking about the scale of the numbers that Bitcoin can go to, whether it's 45,000, 46,000, 50,000, 75, 30,000, whatever it is, you should still be buying Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So,
Patrick, do you have a number in mind?
I can't disagree with Dylan, first of all, but just for fun, might as well play the game since Dylan's being lame and won't give you anything. Here's my thought process on what I think is going to happen. I believe that between now and let's say March, we're going to see Bitcoin spike probably above its all-time highs. I suspect we'll see that right before the halvening. So I could see Bitcoin before April running back to 65, 66, 67,000. What I do see is what we typically see in this area is some consolidation back down. And right around December of 2024, we start seeing the real bull cycle. We see the parabolic phase of the bull cycle. So, I don't think that between now and end of this year, we're going to see more than like 30,000. extra, dollars on top of where we're at now. So I'd say by the end of this year, in between 75 and 100,000.
I think that's a fair number. I will play the game as well, but I want to come back to what Dylan said, and I agree. It's very hard to predict, but I want to let all the viewers know that the value of Bitcoin is not necessarily its price. Getting in before the price reflects the value is where most wealth is made. And I think that we're not going to see that price reflect the value of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not going to change anything aside from its halving this year. It's still going to be the same Bitcoin chugging along with more miners, more hash rate in December than it does now, with more powerful miners. It's going to be stronger. It's going to be a stronger asset, and it's going to be more recognized as such. But the dollar is going to do what the dollar does. And I think that the dollar, given what's going to have to happen in November, or is scheduled to happen in November, and all the information that's in the stuff that's associated with that event that's supposed to happen in early November this year in the United States. You know what I'm talking about?
Why can't we say that one word? I don't get it. Why are we so careful?
Because I don't want to get
out now so bad.
I know you do. I know you do. But everybody knows what I'm talking about. So I won't trigger any algorithms for that very reason.
Fine.
So thank you. But what I'm saying is that I think the price will be over $100,000. I think it should be higher. I think it should probably be 250, but it won't be there. It will struggle to get over 70,000. It will probably peak there and come back, like Patrick says. But they want to keep that price down for as long as possible, because the powers that be want to get as much as they can before it goes crazy. And it will go crazy probably in December, because 6 months after the halving is usually when it happens. And after that major event in November, it's all set to run. So I think 100,000 is reasonable, but I think that's also a psychological number. So I think it'll struggle to get through that. But I think that's about the price it'll be in December. And then in 2025, we'll see numbers way higher than that. So we're not here to predict the future. We're not here to explicitly talk about aliens, but I'm so interested that Patrick brought that up as potential for what's going on this year. We'll see what happens, everyone.
Wait,
but for
Jeff,
all the
let me ask one question back to you guys. Hypothetically, let's say BlackRock or some huge company, let's say Nike, right, buys $1 billion worth of a Bitcoin ETF from Fidelity, Vanguard, a bunch of them all at one time, right? Let's say they split them up and they buy 10 million from all 10. And in one day, they all want to sell. Would they have to put a market sell for all of that? And what would that do to the market if we would have really huge numbers selling, trading Bitcoin like average traders do today that just want to be speculative? What do you think would happen if people like Michael Saylor played on the ETF game? How would that impact? That's something I just popped into my head. I've never thought about what happens when people own it and they want to get rid of it in massive form.
Well, I think a big thing that would happen is to do those big, large trades for those institutions. You almost need the market cap to be a lot higher, because you said $1 billion. Where we're at right now, we're at almost $900 billion, right? So $1 billion is still a small percentage of that. However, it's still a decent amount, right? And so they almost need the market to be double what it is now to really be able to trade those large numbers without significantly moving the market. So they're going to,
is what they will move the market if they sell. That's what the point I'm trying to make is they will become bigger whales. So we have new whales coming into the picture that we don't even know. And it's going to be done through an ETF.
Yeah,
it's definitely a new dynamic that's on the horizon. It's hard to go ahead, Dylan.
Oh, I was just going to say, if they do that, thank you, because they're distributing Bitcoin and you should be buying it up on sale, because they're going to have to buy it back. Someone is. Right. And it's going to keep getting bought. The demand's going to keep going up. That's what this ETF really is showing, is the demand is continuing to go up. The canals that are being built, or the riverbeds that are being filled with water that are allowing more capital to flow into Bitcoin are just increasing. Right. Mm-hmm. So you just have more and more routes to getting Bitcoin, to bringing capital to Bitcoin. And so those aren't slowing down. So they can play their games, but they can't fight the inevitable that more and more capital is going to be able to move into Bitcoin as we go forward in the future. And they can try to play the games, but they're only going to be short-term games. The long term is that unless the trend changes, and it doesn't seem like there's anything stopping it, the demand for Bitcoin is going to keep going up. And while it seems big now, it's still only a fraction of the global population, of the global capital that has access to Bitcoin and is moving into it. But more and more and more of that is moving into Bitcoin with every year that that Bitcoin is around.
Yeah, I think to echo what Dylan is saying, it's a great question Patrick brings up, and this is just one of many that's going to come up with a new marketplace. I mean, this
You're talking about the market too. Like you could have a day where Friday market closes, company acquires hundreds of thousands of dollars of Bitcoin, and then all of a sudden the price of Bitcoin goes up, the price of the ETF goes up, they sell that, and now they got their Bitcoin at a discount. It's like we're going to see such ridiculous games here played that I'm not sure what's going to happen, but all they could do it with is the real Bitcoin on chain.
Well, that's going to be, I mean, the whole premise of the ETF is it's not futures anymore. We've got a lot more liquidity coming to the market, and these games are going to be played because what these professionals, what these Wall Street people that are now exposed to Bitcoin through the ETF, they play these games all the time. So we're going to see how these games that they normally play with other stocks and mutual funds and whatnot, how those games are played with Bitcoin and how that affects the marketplace for a marketplace that's open 24/7. So it's going to be interesting. And while there's so much positivity right now because of Bitcoin and the ETFs being approved, there's still going to be FUD. There's still going to be stories that come out there, like maybe a Mt. Gox story or another exchange going down. There's going to be stories that come out that are going to put negative pressure down on Bitcoin, and we'll see how the markets react. But it's going to be interesting to see the dynamic. I really think the overarching thing is that they're going to try and keep the price down through 2024 so that the people that really understand this can acquire the assets as much as they can while the price is depressed or suppressed, I would say. So I don't have anything further today, guys. I think it was a great episode. I know that, Dylan, you got another appointment to head to. Any final words from you today, Dylan?
Yeah. Don't keep your Bitcoin on exchanges. Get it into secure self-custody. If you don't know what that is or how to do that, or have any uncertainties, reach out to us or someone that that you can trust to get that done, and get that done yesterday. Right. That is always important. It's not something you should wait for, because like Jeff said, you never know when an exchange could go down and poof, there goes your funds. And we don't want that to happen to anyone.
Excellent point. And I also predict that the banks are going to be offering custodianship for your Bitcoin when it really won't be holding your Bitcoin. It'll be just another bail-in opportunity. But Patrick, any thoughts that you have out there?
No, guys, just keep your head down. Keep focused on doing what you are good at. Keep stacking sats in the best way you know how possible. Add value. Reach into your community. Remember that there are people around you who think like you, who want to be with you, who think like how to prepare just like you. So start doing something today to expand your community.
Yeah, wise words there. So everybody, this is a great show. Stay prepared so you're not scared, and get informed like watching this show and many others like it. Read our book, get involved in the economic preppers. If you have questions, reach out to us. So just keep watching. We really appreciate that. Again, like, share, and subscribe, and be prepared, not scared. And we will see you in the next episode. Take care.